What is going on, guys? We have a blockbuster video to bring to you guys, and it is Tucker Carlson and Piers Morgan released yesterday. I thought this was a great interview, and I think every American should see this in its full context. Hope you guys are having a blessed weekend with you and your loved ones. Let's get started.
What would happen? Well, China would take over. And so anyone who didn't think that through is not qualified to lead anything. I almost want to run for president just to debate Ted Cruz.
Well, why wouldn't? Going to war is the gravest decision a leader can make. It's a decision which, by design, causes death at scale. It reduces the quality of life for your own people, at least for a while, and it inevitably unleashes chaos, both economic and political, which is inherently not within your control. That's why most leaders carefully construct a case for war based on the costs and the rewards. Amid the suffering, they see great benefit in the national interest. Could it expand our territory or our control? Does it eliminate a genuine threat, which makes our country safer? Will it make us more powerful in our own geographic neighborhood? Is it popular with our people? Does it strengthen our national unity and pride? For President Trump right now, the answer to all these questions is no. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu...
Yet, if you watch like Fox News or big media, they're saying that 90% of the Republican base and a lot of Democrats, which is surprising, support this war. I don't know anyone that supports this war whatsoever.
Says he's dreamed of this for 40 years, it could be yes on all counts. It's therefore perfectly reasonable to believe that Israel led the US into this war in Iran, not least because Marco Rubio said it, and Antony Blinken said Netanyahu tried the same strategy with the two previous presidents. But it doesn't answer the question of why President Trump went along with it and why now. The answer could simply be oil, as it's often been before. Prices are swinging wildly at the moment, but the president said this.
Prices are coming down very substantially.
No, they're
Oil
not.
will be coming down. That's just a matter of war. That happens.
He said day one everything would get cheaper. He also ran on no wars. This is a complete fraud of an administration, and I voted for him. But you know what? I'm not biased. I'm going to admit when my side is in the wrong. They are in the wrong.
You can almost predict it. I would say it went up a little bit less than we thought. It's going to come down more than anybody understands.
What if instead of designing thumbnails, you could just paste your YouTube link into our AI and it would create scroll-stopping?
As it stands, Iran has only tightened its grip on the Strait of Hormuz. It's now exporting more of its own oil than before the war began, while making it more expensive for everybody else. And if the US always planned to take control, to conquer the strait and leave Israel to police it, why did nobody say that? Trump was crystal clear about the unashamedly selfish benefits of raiding Venezuela. He's made a similar case about Greenland, whether you agree with it or not. So why the muddled messaging now? It's impossible to disconnect it from the bigger picture about his final term, the defense of MAGA's legacy and the battle for its future. The so-called MAGA war was red hot long before the Iran war began. Trump will be well aware that one side is extremely skeptical about Israel because it's a direct threat to a very...
I would suggest, or actually I'll show you guys maybe after, Whitney Webb. She is the #1 person in regards to exposing most of the stuff in regards to Epstein besides Julian Assange, WikiLeaks owner. And she actually made a great point on Trump and why they used Trump for this presidency this time around. And maybe I'll play it after. It makes perfect sense. I never thought of it in that concept.
Interpretation of America first, fix this country before sending bombs to fix everybody else's. The other side would rather you didn't talk about Israel at all, as is to express unconditional support. Israel, they believe, is a key overseas territory in a new American empire which rules the world with muscle. That battle of ideas is going nowhere fast, which is why presidential hopeful Ted Cruz said this.
I believe Tucker Carlson is...
This dude's such a cook for Israel. He literally has to come out on Tucker saying that the #1 reason he ran was to put the interests and protection of Israel first. Not America, Israel first. This guy's a joke. By the way, I hope Tucker Carlson runs. That'd be awesome.
Single most dangerous demagogue in this country. And I'll tell you, I've made the decision that I'm going to take him on head directly.
Well, Tucker Carlson rejoins me now on our sensor. Tucker, how are you?
It's such a serious topic, and then you play the Ted Cruz clip, and I laugh. He already took me on head-to-head last summer.
That's true.
I'm not running for president. So I don't know why he would be running for president against me. But thank you. And Piers, as I have said publicly a number of times, you have been, even though we disagree on a lot of core issues, you have been a champion for free speech for years, especially as free speech, the allowable window of free speech shrinks, and you've been one of the world's great champions of it. So I'm not surprised that you're getting attacked for that, but good for you for what you're doing. Thank you.
Well, we're going to come to some of those attacks a little later. Just in relation to Ted Cruz, I mean, I watched that interview that you did with him, where he had no idea how many people live in Iran. And as you rightly pointed out, that ought to be probably a basic prerequisite of knowing about a country before you may wish to, for example, attack a country. And it may be that him now responding in the way that he is because you embarrassed him so much that day. But in relation to
let's not pretend that Ted Cruz, yes, he supports the war in Iran and every war that Israel wants us to fight, but he will never himself sign himself to go fight on the front lines or his children. He knows that, and that's why he continues to open his mouth.
Claim that you are the single most dangerous demagogue in America. How do you respond to that?
Well, I'm honored that I beat Mamdani and AOC and the entire Democratic Party. I mean, this is a conservative Republican senator from Texas telling you that I am the most dangerous. Well, why is that? I have no allegiance to any foreign country, only my own, the one in which I was born, unlike Ted Cruz, who's from Canada. Why would I be the most dangerous? In fact, I'm not a demagogue. I don't seek to divide people. It pains me to see people divided. It's against my religion and it's bad for my country.
I agree.
He's mad at me. Well, because his interview didn't go well, as you said. That's true, I think. But he's actually most mad at me because I'm criticizing our alliance with Israel, and I'm not.
Not to mention, he was booed off a stage last week because people were like, "Are you America first?" And he said, "If you ain't going to support Israel, I have nothing to say to you." And he walked out on this press conference. You can find this on X. He is an utter embarrassment, Ted Cruz.
Doing that because I'm getting anything out of it, I'm certainly not. Or because I hate Israel, I don't and never have. But because I don't think it helps the United States. And I've been saying that for the last year to increasing irritation from agents of Israel like Ted Cruz. And now this war kind of proves the point. Unfortunately, I wish we hadn't come to this, but this is so destructive to American national interest that it's hard to believe destroying American national interest, weakening the United States, wasn't part of the point. How could it not have been? And the last point I would make about relevant knowledge of a country you seek to overthrow is that, like, looking at maps doesn't tell you the whole story, but it tells you part of the story. And at the eastern end of the Persian Gulf is a strait called Hormuz, through which 20% of the world's energy flows, and a huge percentage of its fertilizer and sulfur and petrochemicals and things that we need for civilization. And if you shut that down, the world economy tanks. And by the way, if you take out
these politicians have no clue about any of this. That's what I'm saying. Why are these people even in positions of power? You have Lindsey Baum talking about going to Cuba next and bombing them. This guy is being campaigned with Trump. He is literally supporting Lindsey Graham and this dude named Ed, who I've never heard of. He's a dork, over our favorite politician, that is Thomas Massie. Trump is the swamp, and he's also campaigning with the swamp.
The government that controls one half of that strait, and that government is replaced by warring tribes, a civil war, then you open it up to piracy. And anybody with a $400 drone can prevent an oil tanker from getting through the strait. So chaos is actually the enemy of commerce, as are, terrorist regimes. But chaos is actually even more of a threat because you cannot meaningfully negotiate with pirates, even with the Houthis. So, what was the plan? What was the plan to overthrow the government of Iran, or even attack it in a meaningful way without jeopardizing core American interests? And the answer is there never was a plan, because the people who thought this up don't care about core American interests. And the net effect is to hand the Middle East to the Chinese, which is what is in process of happening. And I hope, for the sake of the United States and the world, that we can stop that.
China is eating our lunch. I would suggest, and I don't support China, but if you look at how they look as a country, it's like something from the Matrix, from the future. Like their technology is so much more advanced than us. Like their skyscrapers, their buildings, their roads, just how their environment looks. It looks so much more nicer than America. And we're supposed to be the freest and also the world leaders, yet our cities and states look like shit while we're still fighting in never-ending wars in the Middle East. How does that benefit any American?
Truth is, our real allies in the region are the 6 Gulf monarchies that control a lot of the world's energy. And by the way, they're pro-American and decent people, as you know, because you and I had lunch there. This is a nice part of the world. It's being destroyed. Yeah, these are our allies. We have bases in these countries for a reason, not just to protect Israel, but to protect the Straits of Hormuz. We haven't been able to defend these countries to the extent that I think they thought we would be able to. We've moved a lot of the anti-missile defense that might have protected them to Israel. And so for them at the end of all of this, the question is going to be, do we allow the Americans to come back and occupy bases on the Persian Gulf? What's in it for us? We just got bombed for it. No one protected us. Our energy infrastructure is damaged.
Not to mention that we probably have thousands of sleeper cells in our country. We don't know who is in our country. And if you piss off Iran by continuing to kill their people via the school you just blew up, over 100 kids were killed from the U.S. missiles. That's unacceptable. So they can activate people in our country. We are on very dangerous territories. And I just think these politicians are just playing with Americans' lives. Like it's so sad. And I feel so bad for our military that they even have to be a part of this. It's such an awful decision that Trump made going against this.
Economy is offline for months as we rebuild it. In the case of Dubai, it's a branding disaster. Like there's no upside. And so at that point, the Chinese, the world's largest economy, kind of sat this out on the sidelines, said basically nothing, maybe called on to negotiate some kind of peaceful resolution to this. The Chinese, not the US, the Chinese. And then it naturally follows that China, which is the largest trading partner of every country on both sides of the Persian Gulf, would become the dominant power in the Persian Gulf. It would become Chinese. So like, if you thought about this for 2 minutes before advocating for it, you might arrive at that conclusion, or at least conclude that's possible. That could happen if killing an 86-year-old religious leader didn't cause a spontaneous creation of a pro-Western government, which was apparently Ted Cruz's plan. If that didn't work, what would happen? Well, China would take over. And so anyone who didn't think that through is either not qualified to lead anything, including one half of the state of Texas. That person is probably actively working against America's core long-term interests. I mean, I don't know what other conclusion to reach.
It's been reported that you described the attacks when they first happened as evil and dangerous. Is that true? And is that a reflection of how you felt in that moment when you heard it had finally happened?
Whoa. What's that?
Sorry,
I
guys.
the budgeting app in base 44. Guys,
I got a text from someone I known for many years right when I woke up and said, what do you think of this? And I said, evil and disgusting, actually, is what I said. And I wrote it to John Carl, as a reporter at ABC News, who I've known since the early 90s. I had no idea this was some kind of on-the-record thing. He immediately went on breaking news and reported that. I had no desire to get that out there. I want to present my views in a more cogent, thoughtful way than just growling right when I wake up in response to the news on my phone. But yes, I'm not running away from what I said. That was my initial reaction. I thought this was a disaster for American interests. I've thought that for many years. I've advocated against this war. I advocated against a war in Iran with Trump in the first Trump administration. So this is not a new position for me. I don't want to be vindicated in my fears.
We're 100% anti-war. That is what we voted for. Regime change in Venezuela, we didn't vote for that. War with Iran, we didn't vote for that. The Ukraine-Russia war, they're talking about sending them military aid. I believe they already did. We didn't vote for that. Also, with the farming situation, he's passing a bill helping Argentina. Like, where is the America First policies where it's going to help our farmers, help our everyday lives, help Americans who are barely getting by and having to have 2 sources of incomes to still barely even get by?
But unfortunately, I think the very few people who publicly oppose this are being vindicated because I don't know what the case is that this is good for the United States. No one's even attempting to make that case. So instead they say, well, you hate Jews. To which I always say, well, not only do I not hate Jews, I think anti-Semitism is immoral. It's against my religion. Shut up, you hate Jews. And that is designed to do a bunch of different things, create more loyalty to Israel. There's so much anti-Semitism, you must be loyal to Israel. That's definitely one of the aims of this. Another is to imperil the person you're calling a Nazi, because Nazis get shot. Everyone knows that. And the third is to make people who disagree with you, or who platform those who might disagree with you, or Bibi Netanyahu, censor them, take them off the air, shut them up, silence them. Those are the points of it. But at no juncture have I ever met anybody who has laid out like a kind of reasonable, even slightly fantastical, but just like logical case for how this war will benefit the United States, make us stronger, safer, richer. I've never heard that case. I'm waiting for it. I would love to hear it. I'd love to believe it.
I'm the same way. I've been saying since it started, how does this benefit us at all? I mean, it was oil supposedly in Venezuela, but then that oil, if you check where it went to Israel. The Iran war, I don't see how it benefits us at all. And they say death to America. I actually understand that in today's society. I wouldn't have back then, because we've been bombing and killing their people by mass numbers for decades based off lies from Netanyahu, who's been on record for the last 30 plus years saying they are weeks away from weapons of mass destruction, even though Israel themselves have those weapons of mass destruction, which they stole from America. Look into how they got it. They stole it from us.
You were in the Oval Office with President Trump. You were photographed with him. You met him, I think, maybe 3 times in the months leading up to this war. And I presume you discussed the potential for war in Iran with him. Did you try and persuade him that this would be a terrible idea?
Of course. That's why I went 3 times in a month, 5 weeks maybe. Yeah, that's why I went. And I've known him a long time, as you have, and always gotten along with him, still get along with him. I still like him. I'll always like him no matter what happens, just because I like him as a guy. And I think he's trying his best. But in this case, I couldn't have an effect. I tried sincerely. I wasn't getting paid for it. It's coming, of course, at some reputational cost. No one wants to deal with being called a Nazi, screamed at, or threatened, or having your kids threatened, which has happened to me a lot. And no one wants to deal with that. But I just felt that this was so serious that it was worth doing whatever I could, because...
Yeah, I completely agree. I love that comment. Piers is almost like he waits for when everyone else says it, and then he'll start to call it out. Because as we know with the Ukraine war, he's been huge with propping that up. Also in regards to mask, in regards to everything on, Movid, I'll say, you know what I'm talking about. He has pushed all the talking points from the elites. So it's at least good seeing these coming around. Just took him a while.
Gosh, people could die. The balance of power globally could change. I've never supported the idea of an American empire, but we have one. And it's in retreat, but there's a way to manage that that's not damaging or profoundly damaging to the United States, the country that I actually live in, that I was born in. And this is not the way. Wars accelerate trends in progress. They bring massive and unexpected change. Every war does this. It's the nature of war. The second people start dying, all kinds of things you never anticipated will happen. And you can't control them. You lose control of the process. I've covered wars. I've certainly watched a lot, read about a lot. I'm not an expert, but I try to apply obvious lessons through history to present day realities. And that was the first thing I said to the president and anyone else who would listen. Once this starts, the world is going to find out exactly how strong we are, which is not something you necessarily want to reveal. An implied threat is much more effective. In other words, like, if we're squaring off for a fight and you look huge, you've been lifting a lot, I'm afraid of you, but I don't really know what you're capable of until I hit you or you hit me. And then we find out, and maybe it turns out you have no heart, and you lose. I mean, war is kind of the great reveal. And you don't necessarily want to go there, especially if you've ruled the world without question for 80 years and your capabilities have never really been tested. You haven't fought a big country really since 1953 when the Chinese entered the Korean War. So you don't really know what you're capable of, and you don't really want to find out. Let's not find out. How's that? But I lost. So as you can see.
If you want to sell your house in Sacramento for top dollar without paying enormous commissions, we're doing.
Did you, when you were talking to him, Tucker, did you get a sense that he was on the fence about it, that he was potentially persuadable, or did you feel that he was minded to do it, notwithstanding what you were trying to persuade him to the otherwise?
Well, this was over the course of a month, and that included. So I went there 3 times, but I, also talked by phone a bunch, and with him about this, and a lot of other people did too. To advocate for it. A lot of people. I don't think many people within the White House were advocating for it. Is my sense. Not that I would really know. I don't work there, but my sense is there weren't a lot of cabinet secretaries saying, "Oh gosh, we got to have a war with Iran." But there were a number of people from the outside who were all sort of visible. You kind of know who they are, donors and advocates for Israel who were advocating for it. And my sense is his view started to change. Well, obviously it did because he did it. But at no point did I detect an enthusiasm for it. He didn't seem eager to do it. He didn't want Iran to have nuclear weapons. That sounds fair. I don't have a problem with that. I don't want anyone to have nuclear weapons. I want Israel to have nuclear weapons. I don't want France to have nuclear weapons. I mean, that's a pretty reasonable position. But the idea that you would go into some kind of conflict that could very easily become a ground invasion, or who knows what it becomes, a nuclear exchange, who knows? He was not eager to do that from what I could tell. And again, people tailor their positions to the audience, but I talked to him a lot. And I never one time got the feeling he can't wait to do it. But I also turned out to be correct, that there was an enormous amount of pressure on him, like enormous. I mean, clearly there was an enormous amount of pressure. Where exactly did it come from? It wasn't just from Mark Thiessen of the Washington Post, who was calling a lot to demand more killing. Mark has a lifelong track record of doing that, but no one cares what Mark Thiessen thinks. I felt strongly, and I feel strongly now, that there were forces that were forcing him in this direction. And in fact, the Secretary of State, as you said in your intro, admitted.
Want to know what I think it is? Trump might have came in with good intentions, or maybe he didn't. They said, you don't have choices like you think you do. The president is not in charge. It's us, CIA, and Mossad. And if you don't do what we say, we're going to release all this stuff. And it's either he's on the Epstein files, or him and his whole administration, plus the last 3 administrations, the Republican Party, the Democrat Party, they're all on it. And he knows that will bring the whole system down. But that's exactly what we need. We need a system update, restart.
Much out loud, and said, Netanyahu said, we're going to go first, and you can either, watch your assets get destroyed and your people get killed in the Middle East, or you can join us. The question, though, is why at that point?
I thought that was really, I think, a fascinating moment when Marco Rubio said that, because it prompted Antony Blinken, the former Secretary of State, who'd obviously done his job, to then reveal that Netanyahu had tried to pressurize both Biden and Obama into doing the same thing, using the same pretext of, we're going to go and do this anyway, are you with us or not? And of course, in both those eventualities, the answer was no, and Israel didn't attack. I mean, do you think, knowing that from Blinken, do you think Trump may have got played here by Netanyahu?
Well, I already knew that.
Being played is an understatement. This administration's been played the whole entire time by Israel since they've started this new administration.
Israelis had done that in the previous administration. I knew they did it in 1973 with the Nixon administration, where they threatened to use nuclear weapons against the Arabs and forced Henry Kissinger to okay arms sales to Israel. So there's a long pattern of this. And I think anyone who knows anything about the Israelis knows that they're capable of this. They're capable of great violence. They take their threats very seriously, maybe too seriously, to the point where they become self-fulfilling. I mean, you could argue about it, but they don't mess around. And of course, this had already happened in this administration. In June, our bombing, the 12-day war in Iran began when the Prime Minister of Israel announced to the administration, I'm doing this week. And my question then, and I raised it, was, how about no? How about no? You're a client state. You've got 9 million people. You're the size of New Jersey. You don't make operational decisions. And you certainly don't tell the world's dominant superpower what we're doing next. Like, why would you? That's like getting a lecture from your children. No. And that was my position, because that seems consistent with the laws of nature. The weaker partner doesn't get to dictate terms. Like, what world are we living in? And whatever, I'm not in charge. So, but that was my position. I think that'd be the position of most rational people. But Israel was in charge of that war. They started it, and they were in charge of this war. They started it. So this is a difficult thing for the people who advocated for the war to deal with, because their whole purpose is not to help the United States. It's to, and not even to help Israel. It's to help the prime minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. If you're loyal to Israel, if you love the state of Israel, what do you think about what's happening in Tel Aviv and Haifa right now? They just had, apparently, an Iranian rocket land right next to the Church of the Nativity. Luckily, it didn't do much damage. But this isn't helping Israel. There's no real end game for Israel here that's going to result in its long-term stability and peace. Of course not. This is a disaster for Israel, actually. Not that I really care, because I'm not Israeli, but I don't want to see any country harmed. And these people are in a very tough spot, because now we've left the rhetoric stage and we're in the kinetic action stage, where the rest of us can just assess outcomes without mediation. Like, who controls the Straits of Hormuz in 3 years? Is there an American military base in Bahrain? What happened to the Fifth Fleet? It used to be there. Where is it now? You know, who's controlling the energy flows out of the Middle East? These are measurable phenomenon. They're not susceptible to Ben Shapiro being like, oh, wagging his eyebrows at you and telling you you're an anti-Semite. It doesn't matter what he says. And so it puts them...
Ben Shapiro's opinion is so irrelevant these days. The dude is such a cuck and a clown. Anytime I listen to him and I go through the comments on anything he posts, it's like 94% people have just calling him a cuck, a Zionist, and saying move to Israel because we don't want you here anymore. That's it. Nothing he says is of substance, and they can never defend their positions in regards to Israel.
Very tough spot. How do they respond? Well, we know from the Iraq War, not a single person is ever going to admit he was wrong. Ever. Ever. One of the most liberating things I've ever done in my life was admit that I was wrong about the Iraq War. And I was ashamed of it. I remain ashamed of it. But once you say I was wrong and I'm sorry, this tremendous weight lifts off your shoulders and you don't have to lie anymore. And that is what liberation actually is. None of these people will do that. None. They feel no compunction, and they won't. So instead, what they're doing is they're just going bonkers on the attack, because, and this is a precept that Israel lives by, the best defense is a strong offense. So rather than like debating you on the terms or admitting that they were wrong in their forecasts and there was no popular uprising in Iran and we've lost control of the world's energy, they're going to say, Piers Morgan, you're a Nazi. Megyn Kelly, you're a Nazi. And you're just like, what? That is a kind of...
If you see what like Mark Levin and people like Mark Levin have been saying about Megyn Kelly and, you know, Dave Smith, Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, you would think that these people are like mass murderers or like cult members who like are having people inflict pain on Israel people. It makes absolutely no sense. We don't have problem with Jews. We have problem with the Israel government. There's a clear distinction between the two.
Insulation that they're constructing around themselves to prevent, well, any kind of soul searching about how did I get it so wrong? And all these people died because I was wrong. They don't want to deal with that. But it also allows them just like keep going on to the next war of conquest or the next satanic disaster that they'll back, which they will.
Have you spoken to President Trump since the war began?
I just through proxies. He called me names or said I was too dumb to understand MAGA or something. It wasn't, from my perspective, a real attack. I can't. I admit my weaknesses up front. Okay, I like pizza, which is wrong. I like Donald Trump, which is increasingly hard to defend, but I do. And I don't anticipate any kind of personal tiff with Trump. I think he was in an impossible spot. I think it's very obvious now that the U.S. president, under our current system, which I pray changes soon, doesn't have the latitude that people thought he had. Like, presidents can't just make whatever decision they want in the interest of their country. There are other forces hemming them in. We don't have sovereignty in a real way. Clearly, we don't. If we're following a country of 9 million people into a war that could displace us as the dominant superpower, we don't have sovereignty. I mean, by definition. And I think every president has felt that since John F. Kennedy was murdered. And clearly they all have. And they've acted within it, with wisdom or not, but they're still acting within boundaries that they didn't set, that no American did. And it's just time to change that system, not because you hate Israel or you're anti-Semitic. I mean, I'm not anti-Semitic. I don't hate Israel at all. I'm never going to. But
yeah, Jonathan, good point. Anyone calling Candace Owens a demon for investigating her best friend's assassination is crazy. You are a crackhead. There's nothing wrong with investigating the murder. And also, Erica Kirk, if you just look into her and her family's past, I know I've said this a bunch, it is sketch as hell. Also, the recording, the audio recording of Erica Kirk that was released today, that's been making the rounds and going viral, shows that she was exactly what I've been saying from the beginning, a honeypot, where this is what they do. They will use these models, these young ladies, to pressure parents into letting their children go and hang out with them because they think it's going to be a shoot, a picture shoot. Or when the parents come back, they're gone. They traffic them. They just rent out a room and then they play the parents, make them feel comfortable, like they're trustworthy people, and then bam, kids are being trafficked to Epstein. That is what Erica Kirk is doing. If you have not seen The Sound of Freedom, what I'm saying makes perfect sense. Go watch that. It's tragic. But yeah, Candace Owens is the best friend of Charlie Kirk, unlike Trump and this administration, who has continued to carry on the lie.
Not the way a sovereign country behaves or should have to behave. And Americans have earned the right to live under a government that makes decisions on their behalf for their benefit. I mean, it's that simple.
That's right. Allegedly. So the Mossad doesn't come after me and sue me.
Hey, did you know that Smut is now paying Sacramento homeowners thousands of dollars upfront to put a...
What Trump said about you was quite revealing, actually, because he said Tucker's lost his way. He's not MAGA. MAGA is saving our country. MAGA is making our country great again. MAGA is America first, and Tucker is none of these things. And Tucker's really not smart enough to understand that. Now, having been on the receiving end of Trump's savage rhetoric from time to time, that is pretty low base for him. But it was an interesting point about what constitutes MAGA, because of course there are many people with pretty short to midterm memories who can remember Trump campaigning so vociferously to his MAGA base before the last election on saying, look, we're going to be America first. We're not going to go marching into Middle Eastern countries anymore. We're not going to wage foreign wars. We're not going to interfere in other countries. And we're going to fix the economy in the United States. We're going to get the cost of living prices down. We're going to end inflation. And it seems to me that it might be that President Trump has either forgotten what he said or wants to try and reframe what MAGA really means. Because if you're a MAGA voter, you must be slightly mystified. You may not want to admit it publicly because you think it betrays Trump, but you must be mystified that within
I'm disgusted by this administration. I'm not scared to admit it. I don't give a shit. This is not what we voted for. This administration has been overtaken by the never Trumpers and the Zionists, who are Israel first. And we are fighting Israel's wars. They're getting free everything in Israel off our taxes. They are the size of New Jersey, a small ass state in America, and they have 100% control over both sides of the political aisle. I'm not scared to say that. And yeah, Alan Dershowitz, also on the Epstein files, allegedly, I will say.
Year of winning back the White House, the guy that campaigned on not going into the Middle East again, not waging foreign wars, focusing on America first and the US economy, has now launched the biggest war in the Middle East in my lifetime that America has waged. And that has inevitably sparked the biggest economic meltdown we've seen as a consequence of a war, not least because, as you said, about the Strait of Hormuz and the damage that is inflicting, and the simultaneous attacks on the Gulf states and all the fallout from that. So it seems to me that he may want to come after you for not really understanding MAGA, but I'm not sure that many in the MAGA movement, if they're really honest, can be comfortable with what is happening here.
I mean, look, I've never claimed to be...
I also agree with that statement, Jonathan. I think just the fact that we have lost U.S. soldiers for Israel already in this war, it's game over for Trump. Like, I have zero respect for people like him.
A genius because I'm not a genius. And so it's entirely possible there are motives I don't understand. I certainly tried to understand in many conversations with him, but maybe I didn't. I'll keep that possibility open. And as for what MAGA is, it's a slippery definition. I mean, I think George Orwell wrote a bunch of books about this, including Animal Farm. Definitions change. I remember someone pointing to a picture of 100% black people once and telling me that's diversity. Or thinking, looks like uniformity, actually. Like, what do these words mean? I don't know. I do know what America First means because it's a much more precise description. And it means you put America first in every decision that you make as an American leader. And this, by that definition, falls far short. In fact, it is by definition not America First because the administration has already said we followed the lead of a foreign country in doing this. We put their interest.
Yeah, it's crazy. And these people don't even have to fight their own wars. We never see the Israeli people having to fight their own wars. Now that's actually at home, so now they actually got to deal with the consequences finally.
First. And I think most people, no matter how they feel about Israel, whether they love it or hate it, or it doesn't matter. It's nothing to do with this specific country. It has to do with any country that might be leading us around, particularly to our destruction, and putting its interests before ours. Our leaders can never agree to that, period, because it is the opposite of America First. So, whatever Trump said about me, I didn't take it personally. I suspect he doesn't really mean it because I've always gotten along with him for 30 years. I expect I always will. But on this one specific question, America First, we can say this was not America First. This was at least America Second. I do think it's obvious that Israel understood, because they're not stupid, that the effect of this war would be to get the United States out of the Middle East. And unfortunately, I think that will be the effect. And they want that because why would you want a dominant power in your region telling you what to do and hemming you in, as the U.S. has to Israel? No, you can't do this. No, you can't do that. We may not mean it, but we still hassle them or used to hassle them over, say, the West Bank settlements. They want the U.S. out, and they're moving to India. Okay, that's their calculation. But how is that good for me as an American? It's not.
It's not.
So America First. Yeah, this was not.
And then they say they want to liberate the people of Iran while they're bombing young girls at a girls' school. So how does that make sense? You're bombing these people while you're trying to free them. That doesn't make any sense to me. Now, if you're bombing just military places or a place where the military is, okay, I get it, even though I'm against the war, but you are literally killing innocent civilians while you're saying you're trying to liberate them.
America First, whatever it was.
Well, what is very interesting is that I can't remember a war that once it started where American forces have been committed by an American president where there hasn't been majority support for that war in the United States in the polling. This is the first time where there isn't. There's a majority of a lack of support for it. Americans are not, they're not buying this war. They don't want it. They don't really understand it. And they're very concerned about the consequences.
The only people who support this war are those born between 1946 and 1964 who watch a lot of Fox News. That's it. I'm not attacking them. By the way, they're Americans. They're my equals as Americans. I love a lot of them. But their perspective on the U.S. and the world is very different from everyone else's. Very, very different. And so they're not the ones who got Donald Trump elected, actually. The people who got Donald Trump elected are the people who hadn't voted for Republicans before or even voted at all before. And they're like Joe Rogan listeners, or people who use nicotine pouches. They're Hispanic voters. They're young black men. They're non-traditional Republican voters who voted for Trump because he promised not to keep doing the same thing. And one of the things he promised not to do again was to hand operational authority over to Benjamin Netanyahu, as other presidents have. We don't want any more of that. Why would we? And we're not going to make Mark Levin or Ben Shapiro, who have almost no organic support in the media world, like no one really watches them. We're not going to hand control of our foreign policy over to people like that who don't know anything and who don't have America's interests at heart or even in mind. So breaking faith with those people, those voters, the ones who actually got Trump elected and whose coalition promised a new day in American politics, that's a big deal. It's a betrayal on the level that I don't think people who aren't in those groups can understand. Like, this is heartbreaking. And by the way, a lot of those people really like Trump. They like his style. They think he's hilarious. He's brave. He's just like, they like him. And to see this is, it's so wounding. It hurts. I've got a bunch who work for me. I'm related to some, they're all Trump voters. And I talked to them in the last 24 hours. Boy, they're upset. They're not just mad. Like, I hate Israel. That's not the impulse. They're definitely starting to hate Israel. Why wouldn't they? Our relationship with Israel is hurting us gravely. It's getting Americans.
Yeah, it's making us look weak. And everyone I know that voted for Trump, including myself, do not support him anymore. We have come to agreement that we are a black pill. Black pill means you've come to conclusions that both sides suck. They don't have our best interests and they're owned by the system, both sides. So it's time for us, the people, to unite and have people that really represent America run. I think a Thomas Massey Tucker Carlson ticket would be the best ticket ever. Let me know what you guys think.
Killed. So they're mad, but it's more than mad. I can't believe he did this to us. I feel just so depressed about it.
How politically damaging could it be? We've got the midterms coming up in November. There were already a lot of reports that it was likely the Republicans would lose control of the House. Now I'm reading more reports that it may be that they even lose the Senate, which would render Trump notwithstanding.
The Republican base isn't happy. The only people supporting this are the old boomer Republicans. Seriously, the Fox News watching boomers who are very old, who don't have to go to war, who, are retired, have their own housing, don't have to worry about the future. Us younger generations, we're struggling. We're not happy about these wars. They don't benefit us at all.
Adding all these kind of mystical powers to avoid the normal norms of politics in America. If you don't have control of the House and the Senate, you are a lame duck president, period, end. There's pretty much nothing more you can do.
That's true now. I mean, I think the conversation has moved on from the president. It's not an attack on him. He still, of course, is commander in chief. He threatened some kind of mass destruction of Iran yesterday. It sounded like a nuclear strike to me. So he has the capacity, to make decisions. He's the president, elected president. However, as a political matter, that era is over for the reasons I just described. I didn't want that to be true, but the coalition is permanently fractured. He was not elected because of Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro did not get Donald Trump elected. A lot of the people Trump is now attacking got Donald Trump elected. Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Remember, Ben Shapiro was the one that was supporting Ron DeSantis. He wanted Ron DeSantis to get elected, and I believe Mark Levin was one of those people as well who now say he supports him. All these people that are now saying they're the MAGA or part of the MAGA coalition were never Trumpers.
Etc. So that coalition is done. The Republican Party, as currently constituted, will not continue because it doesn't represent its voters. It doesn't even try to represent its voters. In fact, it shows open hostility to its voters. So nothing like that can continue for very long because it doesn't make any sense. It's a bicycle with square wheels. It's ludicrous. So the question is, what comes next? And I do think it's possible to recreate some version of the 2020 Trump coalition or the 2024 Trump coalition on the basis of his core promise, which is just put the country first. And you're going to make mistakes and we're not exactly sure how to fix certain things.
What I think is no wars, Epstein files being released, 100% of them, and no APAC money or overseas donor money at all. You can only have grassroots American money donated to your campaigns. Bam.
But let's all try. And by the way, let's be united as we do it. The ugliest thing to come out of the Mark Levin-controlled Republican Party, which I find repulsive, and I just want to say I'll do everything I can to stop that party from becoming, any more powerful than it is try to stoke religious conflict in the United States, attacking people for being like a different religion. We hate the Muslims, really. How is that different from we hate the Jews? Well, it's not in any sense different at all. And I would say, just thinking long-term about the United States, the greatest threat is not even the loss of the US dollar as the reserve currency globally. The greatest threat is tribalism, where the country fractures into warring tribes. And people like Levin are doing their best to create that. And it's totally immoral and dangerous. It will result in violence. Their endless harping on this anti-Semitism question is part of that. Anti-Semitism is immoral. It's every bit as—
call everyone that disagrees with wars for Israel or that our taxes should fund free stuff for Israel that you're an anti-Semite. No, it's not anti-Semitism at all. We just don't like the Israeli government.
Moral as anti-white bias, which is encoded in the federal government, by the way, and every elite institution in the United States discriminates against whites. That is every bit as immoral as anti-Semitism. That's every bit as immoral as hating anybody else on the basis of their bloodline, because it's a universal principle. It applies to every human being. It's a human right to be treated as an individual and not be held responsible for the sins of your parents. That is a human right in the West. And people like Levin and Shapiro don't recognize that because they are not Western in their orientation. They think that rights only apply to the groups they favor. And that idea, that evil idea, which was the basis of Nazism, by the way, That is the thing that will destroy the United States. And the next leadership of this country, whoever it is, has to articulate we're all American citizens. We must be treated equally under the law. Bias against one group is no better or worse than bias against another group, period. Anti-Semitism. Where were you when the ADL was openly promoting anti-white hate?
Yeah, ADL was promoting anti-white hate. Now you have Republicans like Randy Fine just hating on Muslims, which a large portion of Muslims live in this country. We shouldn't be hating on any color, any creed, any religion at all. As long as you're a good person and you treat people well, you should be treated with respect. But these people on the right and left are trying to keep us divided, and it's not working. And so they just call you an anti-Semite because they know the games are no longer working.
The ADL is an authority on bias crimes. They've abetted bias crimes. They are currently abetting bias crimes. The ADL and every single one of these groups has an absolute moral obligation to treat anti-white hate, which is the only kind encoded in U.S. law right now, as every bit the threat of anti-Semitic hate. How are they different? They're not. And no one will say that until someone does say that, you will not reunite this country. And if this continues, the country will fracture.
في هذا اليوم المبارك 16 من شهر رمضان الفضيل هذا الشهر الكريم شهر الخير والبركات.
As we're talking, with glorious coincidence, Ben Shapiro has been releasing various clips on his social media platforms. One of them goes after me and Megyn Kelly. Me because he blew his gasket about Dave Smith appearing on my show, launched into my show. So
Dave Smith is one of the best. I still to this day have seen a Zionist defend their position. They won't, so they attack him.
It's just Jerry Springer. As I like Jerry Springer, I knew him very well. I worked with him on America's Got Talent. He's actually a very smart guy. Used to be a news anchor, mayor of Cincinnati. Really interesting guy, much smarter than Ben Shapiro. So I took that as a compliment. But and I responded. He didn't like the response. He's come back. He's called me Jerry Springer again. He's called me a click whore. He says I'm a pussy bitch, and he goes on and on and on. I don't actually want to play the clip about me because he's trying to basically suggest that if you platform anybody that he hasn't approved as a person that can speak about Israel, in other words, someone who's a propagandist for Israel who will not criticize Israel, then you yourself are promoting anti-Semitism, therefore you're an anti-Semite, therefore you're basically borderline Nazi. But I do want to play what he said about you, because he's been railing the same stuff against you, which I don't think anyone who has watched this interview so far will have concluded, oh yeah, Tucker sounds like a raging anti-Semite. He sounds like a Nazi. You couldn't sound less like either of those things, and yet he's just posted this. Let's take a look.
I started originally criticizing Tucker Carlson for his economic programs back in 2018. And then in the more modern post-Fox iteration of Tucker, I started criticizing Tucker over his going to Russia to sniff the bread and kiss Vladimir Putin's ass.
Bro, you kiss Bibi Netanyahu's ass every single day. What are you talking about?
My generalized critique of Tucker in the last few months has been, one, he hosted and glossed a Nazi, Nick Fuentes, which doesn't have to do with Israel. It has to do with glazing a Nazi, Nick Fuentes. And then I did a speech at Heritage in which I went through the fact that Tucker Carlson is in no way, shape, or form a traditional conservative. That he's a conspiratorial near-anarchist at this point, seeking to tear down the fundamental ideas and institutions of the United States. Go watch the Heritage speech. I believe Israel is mentioned once in a 35-minute speech that is all about Tucker's general view of the world and how it does not represent traditional conservatism in any way.
Bro, you literally supported Hillary Clinton. You were never Trumper. You supported Ron DeSantis. This dude is such a joke that he thinks his opinion is relevant in today's society. Ben, if you ever see this, we laugh at you. I laugh at your face every time I see that smug little face of yours, you little cuck boy.
I think that Tucker Carlson has fostered anti-Semitism by having on some of the worst anti-Semites in America over and over and over, and then essentially laundering their views.
So it's the same attack line, essentially, about the anti-Semitism, which is if you or I or Megyn Kelly, whoever it may be, dares to platform anybody who is critical of Israel, let's be clear. I mean, in my case, I've always made it crystal clear, as you have in this interview, I have absolutely no problem with Israel, the state of Israel, with Israelis, with Jewish people, many Jewish friends. It's nothing to do with that. I reserve the right as a journalist to criticize any government, and I particularly reserve the right to criticize the Israeli government, given what it's been doing in the last few years, as any decent journalist should, not least because in Gaza, for example, the Israeli government continues to ban international journalists from operating there or even going on into Gaza to verify what they've been up to. That alone should be a warning sign to everybody that the Israeli government has probably been doing things in Gaza it doesn't want people to know. So, but I took the same view. You know, I oppose the Iraq war. We've talked about this before. But I led the media campaign in the UK against the Iraq war, even though my own brother ended up fighting in it. But I opposed it, and I think was vindicated by what happened afterwards, sadly. But I opposed it and took on Tony Blair, who was the then British Prime Minister, even though my newspaper was the Labour sympathetic newspaper, the Daily Mirror, to the Labour government. But I did it because I thought it was the right thing to do. It didn't mean that I hated British people or my country. In fact, quite the opposite. It meant that I wanted to help the British people and help my country from stumbling into a disaster. And I sense from you that your position about Iran is not driven by a hatred of Jews or Israelis or Israel. It is driven by a sense that you feel this is bad for America and Americans, and probably bad for Israelis and Jewish people as well.
Yeah, I mean, I care about the United States. Again, I was born here. My family's been here hundreds of years. I care about it. I don't expect I'll be able to save it, but I want to do whatever I can to make it better and to avoid obvious disasters like this one. I don't want to attack Ben Shapiro, other than to say, like, that guy went to Harvard, and so did Bill Ackman. Like, at some point, you need to reassess. No, I'm serious.
These colleges are just straight up indoctrination camps, bro.
Oh, these are two of the most famous, richest people in our world. They both went to Harvard. I know them both, not geniuses, like not even close to geniuses. And so, like, our system itself is not producing wise people or even very knowledgeable people. Like, Ben Shapiro had no idea there was a strait at the end of the Persian Gulf and why it was important. You need a system that produces superior people. The British Empire did a pretty good job of this. The United States before the Second World War did a pretty good job of this. We need to reassess our system. That's the first thing I would say. Second, you're right. This is absurd. I think I've actually even argued with you about Israel. I was taking a tougher position than you. You've been a defender of Israel. Yeah. That's why this is so crazy. He wants to talk about this in order to get, this is projection. You're all about clicks. No, actually, Ben Shapiro is all about the money and about the clicks. But here's the part that I think that we should be concerned about. It is now a crime in a lot of the West to criticize Israel. People were arrested yesterday in Australia for criticizing Israel outside, publicly, not attacking Jews, not attacking physically anybody, saying, I'm against the state of Israel. They're arrested for it. They're in jail tonight. That's also true in the UK, as you know. It's true in Canada. It's true throughout Europe. And Ben Shapiro and people in the administration would like to make that the law here. This is the last holdout of free speech on planet Earth, the United States. It's encoded in our Constitution. Also, I would say in the American DNA. We have a right to say whatever we believe is true, period. And that very much includes criticism of a foreign country. You'll never hear me saying from the river to the sea, because I'm not exactly sure what that means. However, if I want to say from the river to the sea, I certainly will.
It means free Palestine. That's what it means, in my opinion. It's a slogan, and we need to free Palestine and free everyone from Israel.
Do that until I die, because that's my birthright. That's a right given to me by God, not the U.S. government. And Ben Shapiro and a lot of these people are saying it out loud. We need to penalize anti-Semites with the law. What does that even mean? You can never, in the United States, prosecute or even persecute someone for his beliefs. For your beliefs, you have the right of conscience in this country. The UK used to have it. Australia used to have it. New Zealand used to have it. Now they're going to jail for saying things that Ben Shapiro doesn't like. So we should be wary of this, because it's all preparatory to legislative and regulatory changes that will ban free speech in the United States. They're saying it out loud. That's happening.
I also think that the really insidious part of it, and there were many insidious parts of it, One is to silence people and to threaten them and to get them cancelled and so on, which is very hypocritical coming from someone like Ben Shapiro, who pretends to be the great king of free speech. But also, there
don't care about your feelings.
Yeah, exactly. But I ended my own monologue response to him by saying those exact words, which probably triggered his little pussy bitch outburst today.
His little pussy bitch outburst. Piers gone with that. That was hella funny, and that's exactly what Ben Shapiro is.
He's called me. But I think the other thing that I find insidious, Tucker, is that there are genuine anti-Semitic people. There are people that hate Jews because they're Jewish. There are people that wish harm to Jews. There are people who still have Nazi sympathies, who think the Holocaust was a good thing.
All right, we are done talking about that. He loves to bring up the Holocaust every time when you're talking about Israel. We got it. It happened. But also the Bolsheviks revolution, I believe it was, where Christians were massacred on a larger scale. I question, by the way, in regards to World War II, a lot of what they fed us. They've lied to us about the Iraq war, so why wouldn't they lie to us about that war? I believe there was a lot of fabrications in regards to World War II.
These people exist. And if you start branding everybody that's critical of this current very hardline Israeli government, with people like Smodrich and Ben-Gvir, who have extremely hardline views, if you criticize a government and you get branded anti-Semitic for criticizing the government for policies that many people think are wrong, then what you're doing, you're allowing the genuine anti-Semites, the genuine Nazi sympathizers, to just ride under the radar. Because, if you go on social media now, everyone's an anti-Semite, according to Ben Shapiro and these guys. Once everyone becomes something, even though the vast majority are not that thing, then the ones who really are that thing get to operate much more freely, I think.
That may be true. That's not my first concern. My first concern is the innocent falsely accused. Always. It is better to let people get away with crimes than it is to punish a single innocent man. That has always been a bedrock assumption of American justice and of justice itself. You can't punish the innocent. Of course, Israel specializes in punishing the innocent, killing the families of people they don't like. So it's not a concept that people like Ben Shapiro understand or care about, but it's the basis of Western civilization. So you do not accuse or penalize innocent people, much less kill them, A. B, this is a universal principle. It is not specific to one ethnic group or one bloodline. The principle is you cannot attack or penalize people, punish them for the sins, real or perceived, of their ancestors, period. And in the United States right now, and this has been true for 60 years, the only group that is routinely denied jobs, promotions, federal grants, college admission to Harvard is Christian whites. And it's embedded in the law in the United States. We call it affirmative action, DEI, diversity imperatives, whatever. That's the law in the United States. And so if we're going to tackle bias, and I think we should, through moral suasion, we need to attack it equally, evenly, as a universal principle, because if these protections apply only to your group, they're not valid. That's just tribalism. I don't care. Actually,
it's fake DEI, which they say they're for everyone being treated fairly, yet they just base this off our skin color. That's racism, guys. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed that. I thought that was a great dialogue interview with Piers Morgan and Tucker Carlson. I hope it's a Tucker Carlson, Thomas Massie for the next presidential nominee. That would be amazing. That would be America first. Hope you guys have a blessed day. Peace out.